Well, to begin with, and the most important part, is the material itself. The material is a very stretchy, elastic strap that comes from the sportswear industry. It's usually used for trimming on clothing, collars, whatever. It's very comfortable and meant to be worn either against the skin or above any clothing. On one side it's nylon and spandex, and that's what makes it very stretchy. And on the other side there's a knitted yarn that is coated with silver. And as this changes length, the resistance characteristics of the silver change. The resistance goes up and down. Then by placing it opportunely around the body at following the lowest ribs, which we're seeing here, there's a computer that sits here and is connected to the strap on both sides. And as I breathe in and exhale, the length of the strap changes, and the computer can measure that. If we look at the screen, we can see this is showing in real time the value of the belt, how big and small I am. When it's going up, I'm breathing in, and when I'm breathing out, it's going down. Now, all of the other ups and downs that you see on this have to do with talking, gestures, my heartbeat. Actually, most of this information is the heartbeat, the little jagged parts. And so what our software does is first it takes that information and smooths it. So here you see two curves now. One curve is the original data, and the other one is the smooth data. And by using this smooth curve, we can detect the beginning and the end of every breath. So when the smooth curve changes direction, we then look backward into the real data and detect the beginning and the end of the breath. It's much easier to see this when we show the breath as a triangle. So every time there's a complete cycle, and it's not the noise of the heartbeat or some other body movement, we identify that with a triangle. The height of the triangle is how much air I breathed in, and the width of the triangle is how long I was breathing in for. So therefore the slope of it shows how fast I breathed in. So if I breathe in slowly, it's a flatter triangle. If I breathe in fast, the triangle is very steep. Now, this is one way to visualize the data, and the interesting thing is that it shows that not all breaths start in the same place. Most people think you breathe in and you breathe out the same amount. But in reality, sometimes you breathe out a lot more and you become smaller. Sometimes you breathe in and you start breathing in from a bigger size. And the size of your chest when you begin your breath is actually a really good indication of your state of mind and how tense you are. You see, we've done several clinical tests so far on sleeping people. And we've begun to notice breathing patterns that show when someone's falling asleep, show when someone's waking up, and show when someone is dreaming very actively. The same kind of patterns show up during the day, during wake state as well. So you can tell when someone is very tense or when someone is very relaxed. So it's pretty much a direct indication of your emotional state, the way you breathe. In general, what we've noticed is that when someone is concentrated, they stop breathing, or they start breathing very regularly. When someone is preparing for something, they tend to take a lot of breaths and they puff themselves up, they get bigger. It's almost, if you think about the posture of a soldier, attention, you puff yourself up. That's not what someone does when they're getting ready to do something important. When you're getting ready to do something important, you breathe regularly, and you gradually relax, and then you tend to hold your breath. And when it starts, and when you're ready to do the thing, then you start breathing in a big way again. So there are transitions in breathing patterns that help you identify when someone is preparing to do something serious. I can tell you that so far, every person we've tested with this, we've learned something from. We definitely see that breathing is a key to the soul, if you will, chiave dell'anima. It's the key to understanding someone's state of mind. So I'm quite convinced that we will be able to tell when people are concentrated or preparing or just about to do something. And also if they're about to do it properly or if they're about to do it wrong. Because if someone isn't properly composed before they do something, the chances are is they're going to do it wrong. So we can tell the composure of the person just before they do something. And that's the most important part. When I started this project, we were originally measuring air pollution. And a famous cardiologist saw the project, and he was very excited about using this to monitor patients. And I couldn't understand why. I said, look, I'm not measuring the heart. I'm measuring the breath. And he said, if you can tell me how a patient is breathing, I can tell you how his heart is beating. But I can't tell you how he's breathing if all you tell me is his heart. In other words, the breathing pattern is more important than the heart pattern in understanding someone's health. So essentially, it's never been done before, because up until now, to measure how someone breathes, you had to put a mask on their face or a tube in their mouth or something up their nose. Once you start doing that, people don't breathe naturally. Doctors have always wanted this. Coaches have wanted this. Dancers, singers, anyone who does performance that's based on breathing has always wanted to know about their breath, but it was never able to be measured this way. Now it can be measured with something so comfortable that you don't even realize you're wearing it. So essentially, knowing how a person breathes tells you much more about them than what their heartbeat tells them. Another important thing about the breath is that for an athlete, for example, the heartbeat is circulating the blood. In the motor of the body, though, the blood is more like the oil, the lubricant, whereas the air that you breathe and how much air you breathe is the gasoline. It's the power. So up until now, all athletic measurements have been measuring the heart. But it's like measuring the oil going around in the motor. It doesn't tell you the performance. If you can tell how much air someone breathes in a minute, you know precisely how many calories they're burning and how much power they're producing. This is something that's never been measured before, without a mask. There are some tools for measuring the way people breathe when they're asleep that involve elastic straps around the body. But they're more looking at situations, they're not looking at the volume of every breath. They're looking at the timing, how many breaths per minute. But that doesn't tell you how much air you're breathing. So it's fairly useless in terms of measuring metabolism and performance. The double straps that people use are to tell when your nose is blocked, when you're snoring. Because if your nose is blocked and you try to breathe, your chest expands and your stomach goes in. That's called, I forgot what it's called. It shows that your nose is blocked or that you're snoring. If both straps move together, then it's normal breathing. But if one expands and the other contracts, it shows there's a blockage. But it's nothing at all like this. This is the first time that a comfortable elastic strap has been used to measure volume of breath. What we've seen so far over here, and I'll try to make this look a little better with just the triangles, has been showing us the last 30 seconds of breathing. If we start to look at it on a longer scale, so for example, here's the last 15 minutes. This is 15 minutes of breathing, where you can see that at times I take a big breath and start breathing from another level, and it gets smaller and smaller. This cycle, which you see repeating, starts to look a lot like music. This is only 15 minutes. If you look at a whole night's sleep, which involves 8,000 to 12,000 breaths, this becomes very similar to music. This is showing the triangles themselves. We can also see just, for example, the size of every breath. This is the breaths not moving around as the chest moves around, but the size of every breath. This shows, for example, the timing of every breath, how long I was breathing in, how long I was breathing out. Each one of them has musical characteristics to it. And then this right here shows another kind of analysis where we look at groups of breaths to see when someone breathes much less. What you're seeing down here on the bottom are moments of what they call hypopnea, where my breathing dropped so much that my blood oxygen desaturated. And we can tell that by looking at clusters of breaths, like the last 3 breaths compared to the last 20 breaths. Each one of these ways of visualizing the data has potentially musical characteristics. When someone is awake, though, their breathing, especially when they're talking, is very chaotic. It's random. It doesn't have patterns in it. But once someone starts to concentrate, or sleep, or work, then the patterns start to become very interesting and look more and more like music. This is looking at a whole night's sleep. Let's see, it's actually 9,000 breaths, covering a total of 7 hours, 7.5 hours. And basically what you see at the beginning is the patient having quite a bit of trouble falling asleep, and then they fall asleep, which is interesting because their chest gets smaller. Falling asleep actually makes sense. And each one of these phases where their breaths get bigger, that would be what's called phase N1 sleep. And then N2 sleep is where their breath stays stable. N3, and then they drop into this very random breath pattern, which is REM sleep. And then they wake up and repeat the pattern. And so this is one sleep cycle, this is another sleep cycle, this is another sleep cycle. This patient has had 5 sleep cycles, and we've learned to read them. And they actually, the curves, the fact that they actually represent the state of mind during the sleep is a whole new kind of science. To us, when we first started making it, it looked a lot like music. And the really interesting thing is, it's pretty much the same thing for everyone. It's as though the person has a script that they follow when they sleep. And the fact that it's the same for me and you, and even for a dog, because we've done sleep testing on dogs, it's indicative that it's something built into mammals to have to go through a certain kind of breathing pattern in order to relax and recover and prepare themselves for the next day.